The first set of joint practices are all wrapped up, so it's time to talk about it. Plus, we'll break down this season's offensive line and preview the weekend's second preseason game against the Titans. Welcome inside TCO Studios. I'm Tatum Everett alongside The Athletic's Alec Lewis and ESPN's Kevin Seifert for this edition of Training Camp Weekly. I was having a conversation with someone on the sidelines today being like, we only have one more week of this, and that's just wild.
Gone fast.
Gone by so fast.
It's been too much fun.
Oh, there you go. Well, speaking of fun, day one was great. You got to see a bunch of fans out there in the middle of the week, the Titans in town. Kevin, from that day, what really stuck out for you?
Well, I spent the day watching the defense. You know, we've seen in the first preseason game, and I think for the next two, we're not going to see a whole lot of what Brian Flores plans to do this season to opponents. But we've seen them practice all different kinds of things during the training camp practices, and now we got a chance to see what he actually will probably try to do when he's in a game planning situation. And it was everything we could have imagined, probably, and more. It was, you know, showing that they could have one defensive lineman in the game, two, three, you know, four linebackers, three linebackers, no linebackers, three safeties, four safeties, two cornerbacks, you know, every different combination, which I thought they were just kind of practicing to see how they liked. He actually used them all against the Titans. And so even in all that sort of chaos, what was interesting to me is we started to see some trends and themes emerge. And one of them, I think, is that three safety look with Josh Metellus and Harrison Smith and Cam Bynum is going to be, I don't know if that's their base defense, but used a lot. And that, to me, was really interesting to see and see how that kind of came through against another opponent.
Yeah, no, I thought Josh Metellus, I mean, to your point, he seemed to be everywhere. He seemed to be the loudest guy on the field. And I think going back to this spring, he is a guy whose name we've heard a lot. I mean, he is a guy who has been in this building for a long time, has not taken a ton of defensive snaps. But you could tell Brian Flores from the get-go wanted guys who were smart and versatile, and so I think he fits that bill perfectly, and we've seen him as much because of that.
He seems like he really embodies that aggressive mindset as well, someone who's vocal on that side of defense, because despite it being such a veteran, the veterans being maybe a bit few, they're very on the quiet side, you could say. So it's nice to see Metellus out there. You know, I was able to watch the offense a little bit more today in day two. So, Kevin, if we could go to that side of the ball, what did you observe from practice today on the offense? Yeah,
I did watch the offense today. And you know, to me, one of the things that, you know, coming out of last season that I wanted to see was what the interior of the offensive line is going to look like. Maybe not the most interesting thing from a fantasy perspective, or you got to be a real football head to be interested in that. But if you saw how the Giants game and the playoffs went, you know, it's very important that those guys play well and protect Kirk Cousins. And there's a lot of ways they can go about that. And so, to me, like what I saw, Garrett Bradbury, you know, has had some good times in training camp and some times where he's, you know, maybe we've seen some things that happened in the previous years reflected again in training camp this year. But that's the player that they decided to re-sign. You know, you can say a lot about him, but there's a lot of teams that have centers that aren't as good as he is. And then you have the two guards, and I think Ezra Cleveland is pretty much, you know, from what I've seen in practice, the same guy that we've seen before. And Ed Ingram going from a rookie year to a second year, that's always the time when you hope and often see improvement from a player.
Yeah, and I feel like overall, just that group as a whole, they have talked a lot about the continuity of that group. I mean, they brought back beyond just the five guys who started last year. And I mean, offensive line coach Chris Cooper has been very outspoken that he believes that continuity is going to help. Obviously, guys like Garrett Bradbury and Ezra and Brian O'Neill, they've been together. But I think for Ed Ingram specifically, to have guys that know his play, that know his strengths, his weaknesses, I think could help him. I also think he's talked about publicly just how much from a pass blocking standpoint he has tried to do in terms of making sure his balance is on certain legs and certain sets. And so I think this week, facing a guy like Jeffrey Simmons, who is very willing to be physical and tell you about his physicality. It's been really interesting to watch, and I think a good test as this group, to Kevin's point, has a lot to prove beginning from the get-go this year.
Yeah, not much of a better front you can face at this point of training camp than the Tennessee Titans front with Jeffrey Simmons. We won't really be seeing them much on Saturday, and we won't be seeing this next guy we're going to hear from much on Saturday as well. Kirk Cousins did speak to the media today talking about how the offense mentality really took advantage of those snaps against another team, another different defense for a change.
one of the challenges I've issued to the team is, offense. If we want to be a great offense, which is where we want to set our standard, we got to get up on people early, which then allows this defense to do what they want to do. And so it's very important that, hey, we can help our defense as an offense by starting games fast and putting them in a position of power. So that's where you talk about complementary football and team football. Is I want to be a part of our defense being really good because of the way that we play, to start games and to give our defense a cushion and an ability to go hunt in a way that maybe they otherwise couldn't.
Always love hearing from Kirk. He seems like he's in a much better mood, and maybe it's because there is a little bit more continuity within the offensive play calling, within his offensive line. So let's take a look at that offensive line depth chart. I know we did talk a little bit about that in the first half of the show. You see the starting five, same starting five as last season, but the second team are names that you've either heard before. They've been in this system for a couple of years now, even a few years for some of these guys. Vidarian Lowe, Josh Sokol, Austin Schlottman, Blake Brandel, Oli Udoh. There's a handful of guys that are not on this graphic currently that you can check out on Vikings.com / their roster, and so we'll check those out. But a lot of names that even that second team, the guys are familiar with this system. What do you think that could do for a line like this right now, Kevin?
That is always the key to the way offensive lines play well, is if they play together. And you can have 5 All-Pros, but if they're never on the field at the same time, it'd be nice to have 5 All-Pros. I won't go that quite that far. But if you had a choice, you'd want guys to be together as much as you possibly can, as long as they're of a skill level that means they deserve to be here. And I think they are. And so just offense across the board, whether you mentioned play calling, offensive line, the quarterback, even they replaced the running back, and it's a guy in Alexander Madison who's been here for 4 years already. This is his 5th year. So there's a lot of institutional knowledge already on this offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, and I think the other element of it, too, is that they brought in a guy like Josh Oliver at tight end who looks like a defensive end, and he's going to be blocking a lot of them because he is a gigantic piece to, I think, what they are trying to do in the run and the pass. And so I think you add a guy like him. They extended C.J. Ham this offseason, so you have to think they might use him a little bit more than they did last year, having evaluated things. And so I think just those 2 guys, in addition to the offensive line in general, should provide a very different offense and different look, and I think a different level of physicality. And I think you combine all of that, and you mentioned Kirk's comfort, but I think offensively as a whole, there is like a collective comfort that I think you can feel, and you've been able to feel all camp.
I'm going to put you on the spot and make you call your shot real quick.
Uh-oh.
I know. Surprising.
This wasn't on this script.
It was not. It was not. Will we see an improvement in the run game? Yes or no?
Improvement, and I guess it depends on how you measure it, but I do think that they are going to be more efficient, which means that there'll be more carries where they get the amount of yards that they need, and less carries where they're in the backfield or negative yards. And so I don't know if they'll be as explosive. That's the one thing Dalvin Cook was great at, one of the things, and Alexander Madison has not demonstrated that yet. But I do think they'll be more efficient. I think a higher percentage of their runs will be good.
I completely agree with Kevin. And I think the best way to probably think about it is the better downs and distance that you find yourself in, be it 2nd and 6 compared to 2nd and 11, I think the more ease with which the offense can move down the field. And so I think that is the idea from those inside the building in terms of their want to improve the run game. And so I do expect to see that efficiency more often. And it'll be interesting to see how that displays itself in terms of whether the offense does take a big step forward because of that.
It will. I did feel like the trenches were pretty, they were where like the passion came from, a lot of mouthing off at the joint practices from those guys in the trenches, and so I was excited to see that. And, our good old friend Garrett Bradbury getting right in the middle of it, as I always love to see.
Absolutely. Got a guy kicked out, I think.
Hey, that's the story.
Yeah.
That's the story. Well, we hope you've been having fun at training camp. The joint practices were exciting. Here are some of your tweets that you had #VikingsCamp so that they can make it on the screen. We have this one where it's just a whole family, good old family fun. I think the kids really enjoyed this one, but I like this next tweet from Eric Thompson. It says, feels like there's about 2,700 yards this season in this photo of KJ and JJ.
I'll take the over.
Over.
Does Justin can't get 2,700 on it by himself?
No, KJ's in the photo. Well, yeah, come on.
No, I'm kidding. Yeah, no, I do. I mean, I will say this, and this is more serious than the 2700, but KJ Osborne's leadership, like I think a lot of us wondered probably who's going to step in with Adam Thielen and a bunch of veterans leaving, and KJ has handled everything, in my opinion, from a leadership standpoint in an incredible way. And so, does that speak to 2700?
Let's do it.
We'll see, but I think that's a very fair estimate.
Okay, well there you go. That was a very analytical answer to our tweets that were from our fans.
I think she wanted something funny.
No. We also have this last one, which I had to show. We have Hitman 2042 in front of the Harrison Smith Classics jersey.
The question is Harrison still going to be playing when that kid gets to the NFL?
Potentially. I don't know. Wouldn't be the worst person to try and grow up like, you know?
The kid might eat what Harrison does, shredded cheese. I mean,
that's about it. If you want to get your tweet featured in Vikings Training Camp Live, be sure to tweet at us, #VikingsCamp. We've got one more show coming your way next week after the Cardinals joint practices, so we're going to want to see your best photos so they can end up in here. And before we go, speaking of, we have the preseason game this weekend. We also have one on the following Saturday. Of course, this one is at 7 o'clock against the Titans. And we've just seen these teams go up against each other, seen the first teams for the most part, and we'll see a lot of the second team and beyond on Saturday. But Kevin, what are you looking forward to, or what do you want to see an improvement on when you see the Vikings take the field on Saturday?
Well, to me, I'll be focusing probably, and this is a fantasy fun position, is the running back position. I don't expect Alexander Mattison to play. We all saw Ty Chandler play a bunch the other night. I think that'll probably happen again. And let's see if he can string 2 games together that are really productive. And let's see if DeWayne McBride, after his sort of first rookie game, which you always just kind of write off, as a just getting used to the NFL type moment. Let's see if he can get in there and be a little more productive and give the Vikings some reason to think that if they need to turn to him at some point during the season, that he might be able to help them out.
Alec, what do you think?
Yeah, not a fantasy answer, but I'm focused on the safety room. You have a ton of guys in there who have had really productive camps, guys like Theo Jackson. I think Jay Ward, the recent pick this year, has really come on. Lewis Cine is obviously still engaging back in the mix after his compound fracture. And so I think to assess all those guys and then to watch, as we mentioned, how Brian Flores utilizes those guys, I think I'm really looking forward to watching. So the analysis of that will be very fun as always, like it has been all camp.
Well, not only am I excited just because football's back at US Bank Stadium and it's just such a wonderful game day experience, I'm really pumped to see Jaron Hall out there again. I really think, again, to your point, you almost wonder like that was a very much a welcome to the NFL moment for him. And I want to see him have a little bit more time in the pocket, not be under duress the whole time. Love to see the same athleticism and maybe just a little bit more offensive momentum down the field, So I hope to see that, and I think the home crowd will definitely help with that one. Thank you so much for tuning in to this edition of Training Camp Weekly. Thank you to Kevin Seifert and Alec Lewis. You can follow them, The Athletic and ESPN.com. We appreciate you guys for tuning in, and like I mentioned earlier, we have one more episode coming your way next week after the Cardinals joint practices.